Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Hipfire Podcast. This is the 14th episode. Joined today with my co-host Yasser, and I'm Seth, and we have a special guest in Gersh or Vonderhaar Elite.
What's good, guy?
Very excited to have you on.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So before we start, though, we gotta ask every guest. This for you is a little obvious, but we'll ask anyways.
Mm.
For your favorite team, favorite player, and favorite Call of Duty game.
Favorite team, hands down, has to be Dallas Empire. Shout out Illy, man, because like Illy's the goat. Um, and as I was talking to you guys about before we started recording today, Clay has always been a huge influence for me. He's the one that got me into watching professional Call of Duty. Him along with Zuma, Attach, Enable back in the day. So it was good to be able to support both my little biases based off their individual reasons on the same team. Um, Second question was what? I'm sorry.
What's your favorite Call of Duty title?
Favorite Call of Duty title? For me, it has to be BO3. Honestly, BO3 was the first one I had on console. Before that, I was like a young kid. I mean, I'm 18 now, almost 19, but I didn't really have a console before then, except a Wii, which unless I want to play the really half-assed version of zombies on there,
Yeah.
couldn't really get into COD. So I was just downloading what I could on my mom's MacBook, playing the campaigns to everything. BO3 was like where it really started for me. And looking back at it too, I think the map design on that game was phenomenal. So
Oh yeah.
it's just nostalgic.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the also like the movement felt so clear, like so clean on that game.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a
Um,
really insane clip of Illy in some search tournament going from like the top of the barn on Fringe to top of the other house in like 3 seconds.
Oh, I think I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Man.
Yeah, so this is gonna be a fun podcast because we have a lot to talk about with rosters.
I'm excited.
So obviously, Rostermania is going on,
Sir.
and I think what's the 14th is the date, right?
Yeah.
Where they get
Roster
Yeah.
launch. Yeah.
cool. Okay, yeah. So we're gonna start with the first rumored roster that came out. It was pretty quick actually, which is a bit surprising because usually I kind of it's fun in a way because it's so rushed and so chaotic. But it used to be so drawn out. We didn't hear about stuff for a couple of weeks at least, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But we heard about this Atlanta roster pretty quickly. So we got a Cell, a BZ Simp, and then picking up Arcides and dropping Priesta and Maniac. So what do you guys think of this roster?
For me personally, I think it's an upgrade. I mean, going 4v4 already, that team is just nasty, and they can focus more. I think guy like Alec can help them focus more on fundamentals because that's the one thing I felt like we kept seeing for them from this year was they were so slay heavy that there was times they didn't rotate or they make bad plays because they were so cracked out, to say the least. So having a guy, especially like Alec, who one is so familiar with Simply BZ, I mean, you want to chip with them. He knows them. He's their main AR now. They don't have to worry about Cell or Priesta playing flex. I know they flipped both of them for that role a couple of times because both didn't feel necessarily comfortable. So you don't have to worry about that either. And again, Alex is a very smart player. He's been an in-game leader on past teams. I think he's the sort of guy that can sort of guide these young guns in a way. And he's kind of young in himself, but like he can guide these guys and be that voice that I think they need to be able to like consistently win at the top. Because I think even Krim mentioned it, they didn't always win in the grand finals that they made it to. They'd always falter, and I think having a guy like Alec, especially in 44, will change that completely.
I agree with that a lot. I mean, RC is a phenomenal player. He's actually one of the most likable, in my opinion. Just a really great guy. Brings good vibes to a team. I mean, teamwork, especially with this team. Two players he's already been with on E United. You can't go wrong there. And it's all about phase cementing their spot at the main AR position. You've got a guy like Arcides who, for Huntsman, is really consistent, which is why he ended up landing that spot on the Scuff Team of the Year. Um, because you had guys like Major and Priesta, who Priesta, of course, showed up in the second half of the season when it came to the postseason. But it's just all about consistency. And as you just mentioned, of course, focusing more on rotations now that we're in 4v4 especially, and less on just pure slaying power, because you're not going to get as many aggressive engagements. It's going to be a matter of how are we playing out our lives more efficiently and more tactically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of so for me with this roster. That's my only fear is having to slow them down, because like Abizi's really fast. Sim's been fast as well, And I just wonder who's gonna IGL for them. Like who's gonna make the
I think
calls
it's
for
Alec.
rotation?
I think
Who's
it's
gonna
Alec
be?
for sure.
Has to be Alec, yeah.
I don't mind it being Alec. It's just that he does get quiet at times.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm sure they'll work it out. But if he does get quiet, I wonder who's gonna step up because I know, Cell obviously he gets quiet. And yeah, so my only problem for them is just in those scenarios when it's like, especially in respawn game modes, when someone has to make the call to slow things down or someone has to make the call to like kind of collect themselves. Yeah, it might be Alec, but I'm not super keen on that. I don't know why. Something about that IGL thing just bothers me with this team.
That's fair. That's fair.
Good
But
point, yeah.
Um, yeah, because I think like the difference between so let's say if they picked up Clay instead of Alec, right? I feel like Clay has the kind of presence to be like, all right, calm down, like slow down. We've been like we know how to do this. We practiced this before.
mhm.
And I'm not saying Alec doesn't have that. It just feels a bit different for me.
Yeah, Clay has more of that veteran presence that he brings. I did actually smile internally when I saw this rumored roster because Alec is that player that the FaZe need in the sense of he's not afraid to call his teammates out on things that he sees
That's true.
um, could potentially harm them. I mean, there was that one clip that was going around Reddit, Twitter, of Alec complaining about or complaining to his team, not like behind their back or anything,
Mhm.
about the whole streaming scrims and how it keeps him distracted. And I mean, it paid off as they regained, got more focus. We saw them turn it up for second half of the season. Going into postseason, they were lethal.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Yeah,
true.
a team like this. I mean, you don't have to worry about that with streaming with these guys. But I think, I mean, honestly, on paper, they might be the best team in the game. Like, I look at, like,
Ooh.
we'll get to the other rumored rosters later,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
best team in the game, I think, at least forward looking. But Seth, why don't we get into the next one?
Yeah, so next we got the Dallas Empire roster.
Let's go.
Let's go. um, I'm very excited because I think this will give Illy a chance to shine a little more.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is, I feel like he's a really good like flex for a team. And the problem with when you had Clay and Krim is you already had the kind of slow players, and so Illy kind of had to adjust his play style a bit. I think in 4v4 in this kind of a setting with him at flex, he'll get to kind of dictate the game the way he wants, and that'll set them up for a lot of success. I'm very excited for this team.
I think
Yes.
you bring up a great point there about Illy being a flex. I mean, we saw him doing it all last season, going from a sub, being a AR on some maps, and then pulling out that sniper,
Mm-hmm.
especially on Piccadilly. Absolutely, just one to watch. When it comes to this roster, it's something that I spent a lot of time thinking about. Being an Empire fan personally, of course, we had the whole emotions in the postseason with Clay being the one to leave, but it makes sense from a business perspective. If you're Hastro, you're going to want to build around the three young players you have, that iconic trio of XEO, Shotzi, Illy, and Hook. And then it comes to Krim. I think the main issue last year for Krim on this roster was consistency because he had tournaments where he was, frying, and then he had tournaments where it felt like other players were having to step up to
Mhm.
compensate for him not being able to slay as well, rotations not going as well as they could have. So I think it comes down to Krim just being more consistent, which I'm sure he will. I mean, he's got the momentum coming off a chip. He's going to believe in himself more going into the season, but
Mhm.
especially we've got to consider 4v4. Krim's
Yep.
tried and trusted on 4v4. I don't see Dallas plummeting or anything. I think they maintain their consistency.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the one person you need to look at is Krim on this roster. Obviously, I think Illy, Hugh, and Shotzi, they proved themselves. I think they'll look phenomenal. I agree also that Illy will definitely be a player that'll stand out more in 4v4. Obviously, I think for Krim, it's going to come down to he's the main AR now. Clay doesn't take that role he does. So one, he's going to have to be more vocal because I think they're going to miss that with a guy like Clay going. So he'll have to step in that
Yep.
regard, which he
Yeah.
has done in the past. I think people will look at it and be like, why is he the main AR? Why not pick a guy like Clay? I think people forget towards the end of the Optic Dynasty's tenure, especially during World War II when they weren't winning, the one player that they had up in the air was Krim, and he was actually doing very well. I mean, if anyone remembers in World War II when he had the FG, he was actually performing as one of the
Oh
best
yeah.
Yeah.
ARs in the league.
Yeah,
It
he
wasn't
was.
until they made the switch to formal go back to main AR that he suffered as a result. I think if he will, I mean, he's undoubtedly the AR here, so I think him being back in that role will allow him to perform better, and as a result, I think the team will do better.
And one final point
Yeah,
on
and
this. Oh,
also,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
go ahead. No, you can go ahead.
One final point on this from my side. Um, one thing a lot of people need to consider when it comes to whether or not they feel Empire is going to be able to perform on 4v4 and now that we're off 5v5 is that anything that slows down the game for this team is honestly better because we've seen Shotzi been able to keep the pace, with his movement, with his gunplay in that chaotic 5v5 environment, especially on a map like Ramazla where you have people jumping off of buildings, coming out of
Yeah.
doorways, no doors in this game. So it's going to be better. But you look at a guy like Illy, who is kind of the X factor on this team, and there's no bias right here. But Illy is renowned as someone who just brings that ability when it comes to search and destroy. I mean, the way he made a name for himself was playing a lot of search tourneys, especially with Sim Cell back in the day. So he also really gels with his team in terms of that tactical mentality, and I think putting it at 4v4, slowing the game down, allowing him to bring that tactical prowess to this team's engagements, the way they enter each map, especially search and destroy, is honestly going to boost him to another level this season.
That was literally my exact point I was going to make too.
For sure.
I was going to talk about how slowing the game down helps Illy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, 100%.
I
All right, yeah. So with that, let's go on to Chicago because this is a nice
Oh.
graphic.
yeah.
Um, but
a
this is
lot.
an interesting roster. So what do you guys make of this?
Personally, I mean, we saw this coming from a mile away. Dashy,
We did, but
Yeah.
oh, I'm
I
worried.
mean, given Dashy's good friends with them, I definitely am worried. I know people will get on me for this. I like Dashy as a player. I think he's a great flex, and I think on most other teams he works. On this team, I don't think he does. And you look at this team's problem at 5v5. Obviously, it's going to be different in 4v4. But their problem was there were certain moments where I think fundamentally you know, they weren't there. I mean, you look at I replayed the end of that phase, St. Petrograd hardpoint that they had at champs that they needed to push to map 5. And so many times, I know Cell made a great play in kitchen. He got like a 7 piece or something, but still, they had more than enough time. They had 2 hits at that P1 hardpoint to break it and win the game, and they couldn't do it because they weren't playing together and they weren't rotating right. And I don't think a guy like Dash helps that. I think they lose the guys like Alec that help with that smart. I mean, their in-game leader is going to be Envoy, which I mean he's a great player, and I think he's a solid in-game leader. I figured they need a flex that I guess is more fundamentally sound, and we already have. We'll get to that later. I know Seth, you'll want to talk about it, but
Yeah.
Dashian himself has been, he has his own issues with regards to the game and how he approaches the game, and we've seen players in the past knock him for it. I think this is the type of team that to begin the game, they'll be great. They'll be able to outslay teammates, but once teams start learning the game, I think it's going to be really interesting to see if they can adjust to that.
I agree with that. I think a lot of it comes down to coaching. Um, and in terms of Dashy's attitude towards the game, it might have just been the environment on Optic. Clearly, things weren't really going too well there. But looking at a team like Huntsman, where of course it's a good community first of all, and then you have everything from the management with Hex to Sender who try to create that good environment, but also expect a lot from their players. Um, and of course, Dashy being with players that he gets along with, and Formal and Scump. I for sure see him, of course, doing better than last year, which shouldn't be hard for him the way he is as a player. Um, of course, the bane of Huntsman's existence last season was FaZe. We can't really say much about Empire because they didn't go head to head that much. Um, and I think a lot of that comes down to finding that balance between slaying but also tactics. Huntsmen do excel in the tactics department, but what you're saying about having a dynamic flex in this team um, is where it's going to be really interesting. You've got Dashy being an AR, you've got Formal being an AR. So, of course, depends on the game, but we're going to be really interested to see um, how this team finds that balance.
Mm-hmm.
I think the also one talking point for this team has been the same talking point for Scup and Formal for years, and it's like it's search. Because on paper this team should be great at search, but like that's for me. That's where this team's gonna rely on. Like with Dashi and Envoy, they should be a really good search team. And if they can kind of master that game mode, they can definitely still respawn off of basically anybody, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So for me, it's finding that consistency in search for this team, and that'll be good. Because the problem, right, is like if you don't, I feel like if you don't get Dashi rolling in the series, he kind of can disappear, right? So if he's not making flashy plays and doesn't feel like he has the agency to do so, he won't do as well for a series. I think that's kind of the problem that you were talking about on Optic. I felt like he didn't have like the green light to go and make a play,
Yeah.
and I feel like that really hindered him. So we'll see if they like kind of fix that for Chicago, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think they'll try to do their best to build around a guy like Dashi because we've seen him like especially Black Ops 4 when he's at his peak, he can be the best player in the lobby like easily. And I mean, being in a flex, I mean, if they get a 2 AR meta, which I mean, obviously we won't know till like months after the game comes out what the meta will be, but if it does become 2 AR, I think they'll definitely excel in that department.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, this team. Yeah, definitely.
And speaking of next year's game, I don't know if you guys saw that multiplayer reveal yesterday, but
Yeah.
if there's one player to watch out for, it's Scump.
Oh yeah.
My guy got that chopper gunner. He was frying every single person in the lobby, whether it's a top streamer, pro players. So Scump's a dangerous man, and if he steps it up this year, I think this team could really show us what we have to worry about.
Yeah, if Scump manages to return to that, I mean, he had a great champs. Outside of that, he was sort of average, which I mean, you don't need a big event from every week. But if he returns even slightly to that form that he was during the dynasty, then that changes everything for me in this roster.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think 4v4 would help Scum too.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Just a little less chaotic. So yeah, so with that, let's go on to the Optic roster. So obviously they let go of Dashi, and TJ Haley has not been announced yet, but with the little ice symbol in the tweet, it's pretty much implied. I'd be surprised if he doesn't return. um, yeah, so Draza gets the chance on the starting roster. Again, it's not like 100% confirmed that he'll start, but
it's more than
I think he
likely,
will. More than likely, yeah. And so I knocked the Hollow and Draza pickup when it first happened because I thought there were better options out there. And when I did that, I was also kind of leaning more on the knock against Hollow because he wasn't the best Slayer ever.
Yeah.
But Draza definitely impressed me. Like he showed great stuff. I don't know if he really hit the highs that a guy like Mac or Awakening hit, but he definitely looked like he had the potential to do so. And I'm happy that they're picking him up again. Like I'm happy they're not just going back to an old, veteran on the scene who, they know what to expect from him. I like the fact they're taking a chance on a young guy, and I'm excited to see how he plays because like we're not going to see another year like that out of Kenny and TJ. Like they're better players than
Mhm.
that. There's no way they're going to do as badly as they did this year. So if Jazza can step up as well, this is a very scary roster.
Yeah,
You know,
for
seeing. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'll just quickly simplify.
Yeah.
I think of all the teams, this is probably the most interesting one to watch because, like, we all know
Yeah.
for a fact Slasher and Kenny and TJ are not going to play as bad as they did this year. Like, something's got to
There's no way.
give. I mean, even then, we saw them really pick it up a chance. They were a round away from being top 4 and potentially top 3, and then who knows how far they go. So I think with the new Call of Duty title, with a new ambition to like prove themselves again because obviously they haven't won in such a long time. Obviously the Draza, I don't hate him as a player. I think he'll be very interesting, especially because I think Kenny has said himself that he wants to flex. I think this roster can definitely work, but yeah, it's definitely the one to watch out for me.
When it comes to this roster, I'm really interested as to
Oh, you're
why
breaking
we
up a
don't
little
see
bit.
Priest here. Yeah. Hello.
No, you're still a little choppy.
Give me a
You're
second.
good now. You're good now.
Okay.
Oh, you're better now. Yep.
Yeah, what I was saying was when it comes to this roster, the one thing I'm really intrigued about is why we aren't seeing Priest here already. Because it was rumored, and we had
Actually,
the
no,
tweets
it's
from
still.
CDL and Seth saying. Give me a second then. My bad, guys.
Do you want to drop out and drop back in? All right. Got a little robotic.
Okay.
All good. You're good now.
Good? Okay, my bad.
All good.
Yeah, so the one thing about this roster is where's Priesta? we had CDL Intel tweeting about how Priesta was supposed to be rumored to go here. Of course, the connections with Slasher, Kenny, that whole 100 Thieves roster. And then we had the follow-up tweet saying Priesta's no longer rumored to go to Optic. So interesting. Draws is a great option, but it comes to the same thing. Draws is going to be a second player. He's going from 5v5 to 4v4, which we don't know if he's had that much experience with. And I think it really comes to Draws showing his skill at being because Search and Destroy, he was on really had issues with all the rebounds.
Yeah,
Yeah. You can go.
I don't know. I said all I needed to say about this game. I think.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so moving on from Optic. Yeah, I think I'm excited to see them play. I'm excited to see Kenny on the flex, and it should be good. Um, actually, there's a giant storm outside my house, so that might be why the connection's not great right now.
Okay.
Hopefully that clears up. So yeah, moving on, we have the Los Angeles Gorillas lag new roster as rumored. It's an interesting one. I don't think anybody really thought this would happen.
Nope.
And for the first things first, I'm glad they kept Vivid. Vivid looked very good this year, especially in Search, one of the better Search players we had.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited they kept him. My only thing is, it worked for EG at two events, right? It was Seattle and it was Champs in World War II, that they looked good in. Outside of those two events, they did pretty poorly. So to reunite three of that old roster, I'm not so certain on that. I think I would have preferred them to keep Decibate personally. I think he has a lot more to prove, and is a very skilled player. And I would have liked to see him instead of Silly, but they're trying to go back to that former EG team, and I'm not so certain on this team.
Yeah, similarly, I sort of share those feelings. I mean, Assault and Silly. I mean, in many ways, all of these players are coming off horrible placements in Modern Warfare. I mean, Assault and Silly had their obviously Rocker, the Rocker were, I think, in my opinion, the worst team down the stretch. Like, they didn't win anything. They looked horrible. Obviously, Alex had his thumb problem. They dropped Cotter X, which was very confusing. I mean, they've even been called out. Assault in particular has been called out by Krem for saying that he doesn't play to win. And as a result, Assault himself has started calling out players that say that they don't play to win.
Oh, God.
I don't know, for those that didn't catch it, he was calling out Wuskins and all the London guys, saying that they would ditch scrims for Warzone tournaments, and they said that it was because the organization told them they had to and whatnot. So, just going back and forth. The Assault's definitely not looked in a positive light in the community right now. In terms of as a player, I think he's a solid AR. I mean, most ARs are like decent. They're never gonna. I mean, there's so many main ARs in the league that you can just look at and be like, okay, that's good enough to win. I think where this roster is gonna come down to is, can App and Vivid be the difference? I know Vivid and S&D has been very good, but in Respawn, he's sort of been lackluster. Granted, the roster he was on wasn't exactly very great at Respawn, especially dominant. I think they won 3 dominations the entire year. That's
Yeah, it was horrible.
Sure.
It was really bad.
I'm happy to see Apathy's on the team, because there was a bit of a scare that he might actually not get a roster, which in my opinion is absurd. I'm very curious to see, because I think he, towards the beginning of Modern Warfare, was one of the better subs in the game, and then sort of fell off. So I'm hoping he sort of picks it up this year.
Yeah, hopefully.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay. Just make sure.
Oh, it's still a little choppy.
Okay, give me like 5 minutes real quick.
Okay,
Reset everything.
All right. Yeah. So we will power on, and he'll come back in.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So also on this team quickly, the for Apathy and Vivid, I feel like it's a good combination for Search, because we've seen like Apathy have really good Search years. I think specifically World War II was probably one of the best like Search years for Apathy. I know on Forest, he was a beast in Search of that map. Like I think he dropped like double digits in the league like a couple times on that map. So I think Search is one area where this team could surprise a lot of people. Again, with Vivid's prowess. But I think it's just a Respawn, right? Like think about this, right? are Vivid and Apathy going to be able to keep up with Abizi and Sip? Like, I don't know. Like, there's no way, right?
Like they're definitely like a team I don't see as a contender to win. Like I think they'll be fighting for top 6, like barely.
But like, I don't know, man. I feel like they picked up players where we all know their ceilings. Like, they didn't go after anything risky. This is such a safe pick
I
for
mean, I
a
guess
pretty
in their
poor team.
position, they probably weren't getting many people saying, "Yeah, I want to go to leg. I want to go to the second tier team in LA that has it
No,
running."
I guess so, but you could go for some young guys, go for some rookies. You know, maybe they will throughout the year, but I don't know. That's one thing. That's one area where I'm a little upset. Like, there are some guys like Sibilance and Fire who can definitely change a team. So
And my mind, I guess you look at the coaching staff in Bevels. He's got history with these guys, so you probably want to.
that's true.
But let's power it on to the next roster.
Okay, yeah. So next roster we have the Rocker.
Definitely.
And the Rocker. So I'm gonna call this the friendship team. This is yep. This is what that is because look, we knocked New York this year for being the friendship team, you know, and I think for good reason. And I'm gonna say it again here. It's also for good reason. In that it's all about Attach for me. So Attach is a guy who's been, I would say, a top 5, underrated top 5, maybe top 10 player in basically every single title since,
I said Black Ops.
I don't even know. But yeah, I guess, yeah, sure. Black Ops 3, yeah. But he's been outstanding. Like, the past year, he had some of the best stats of any player in the league. Like, he was very, very, very consistent. And now he's gonna go team up with Accuracy again, who was not a very consistent AR, had like 1 or 2 good events the entire year. And then he's gonna team with Major Maniac, who was also a very slow AR, so I don't understand how that's gonna work. And then Priest is a great player. I don't mind Priest at all. But it's friendship because Priest probably wanted to play with Major, and Attach wanted to play with Accuracy, and they found a roster to play on.
Attach and Priest play
But
together on FaZe.
that is true. That's a good point. Yeah. So it's just, for me though, I think it's all about Accuracy and Major. How are they gonna figure out their pacing? Who's gonna be? Someone has to speed up. Like, one of those 2 guys has to flex and speed up. I imagine it'd be Major because he did it on Gen G, but
Okay, Howard,
I am worried. Oh, let's see.
am I good?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're good. Okay, so what are your thoughts on the Rocker here?
Rocker or Gorillas?
So we powered through Gorillas and we're on the Rocker now. Yeah.
My bad, guys.
Oh.
No, you're good. You're good. Don't worry.
When it comes to Rocker, see, this is interesting because I didn't know about Priesta and Major Maniac, but
Oh, surprise.
seeing yeah, I think this is a good team. They're avoiding the mistake that I saw Gorillas making because when I look at that Gorillas roster we just went over, it seems like
Let's go back. Yeah.
they're bringing in a lot of veterans who just this past year didn't really prove too much for themselves. I mean,
Mhm.
it's just a lot of inconsistent players. You're going off of that. Can they bring the fire back that's established them to be who they are? So for Rocker, they've made the smarter decisions. They have players like Lamar, who's of course, a great player. He's proven himself because Subliners weren't even that bad of a team. Only falling 5th to Ravens. You've got Attach, who is, I mean, at this point, cemented himself as a great SMG in the league.
Yeah.
He's always been that, whether it's on Denial or FaZe back in the day. And then Major and Priesta, of course, coming off his 2nd place finish.
Do you feel this team's a bit too slow though? It's my only thing.
I can see why you'd say that. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, you.
I think Attach can play at that faster pace level if needed.
Okay.
Priesta too. And then you just have Major and Accuracy, who are the only ones that you'd worry about being slow. Accuracy especially, but again, it's 4v4. They're playing that AR role, so I don't see that being too much of an issue.
Okay.
Yeah, it's sort of my statement because I look at this roster and it's like you have very good pieces, but it's just weird to me. I don't know what this.
It is a weird team.
It's like Attach and Priesta in my mind. For Rocker, those are great pickups, especially Priesta, because we know he was linked to teams like Optic, and I think even a team like New York maybe at one point, but particularly Optic were the team that wanted him, and for them to pry them away was a great pickup because I think Priesta has shown himself to be extremely flexible, and that he can run any role. Attach also after the year, he's also had definitely one of the most underrated players in the league, which is crazy to say about him.
Yep.
Lamar and Major Maniac are where I get a bit confused. I know Major has played flex in Black Ops 4. He did, and I'd assume on this team he would too, which leaves Priest and attached to be the SMGs. Which I know you mentioned pace is an issue, and I think Krim has mentioned this before. How we're going to see players that are true SMGs, that are like guys like Asim,
Asim.
yeah,
I was supposed to
Oh
say
my.
like
Asim.
Asim, and other players like of his caliber that are just like pure SMGs that run fast and they may not have the stats, but they play to win. They're out, and they're replaced by the flex players like Priest and Attached. That they aren't true SMGs. They can play a bit of both. So for Attached and Priesta, I think it's just about them. They're gonna have to increase their pace. Obviously, can they do it 100%? Will it work? Only time will tell. Because I know one thing, Lamar's going to be the slow main AR. Major is pretty slow flex, so he's going to step up in pace, and it'll come down to Priest and Attached. So they definitely have the pieces to be a top 4 team, and we're curious to see what they're made of.
Yeah, for sure. Now let's get on to your favorite team, Toronto Ultra.
Yes.
um, so obviously they don't make it. Well, they're gonna pick up Insight most likely as a sub, so that'll be
Shit.
interesting. But for the starting lineup, it's the same, minus Classic, and because there's no way Classic was staying after the whole debacle that we
Yeah.
saw unfold.
Oh no.
Um, but personally, this is exciting because I love Cammy. I've talked about it a lot. I think he's this very, very, very good underrated player. Probably one of the best flex players we have. Like he is very, very good in S&D. He's like consistent basically every event. I think he had one poor event this past year. And I was very critical on Vance, but as we saw later in the year, his kind of in-game presence really carried them through. But what do you guys make of this team?
I'm a little disappointed. I'm not gonna lie. Um,
What do you want, Clay?
no, there's that. But even if not Clay, there's such a big like pool of talent in the free agency market that they could, or even through via trade that they could have pursued. And I think they sort of missed out on that. I like them keeping Cam and Kleenex. I think Kleenex proved himself as one of the
Oh,
better
he
enter
did, yeah.
subs,
Yeah.
especially down the stretch, which I'm super happy about. Zinni, obviously strongman AR. He's pretty much the face of the brand in many ways, and I like him on the team. And Cammy was the star player. He's the reason we even made it into the top 8 bracket and made it as far as we did because of all his amazing plays in both S&D and Respawn. I understand why they kept Bance. Obviously, his connection with Marky B is the reason he even got into the starting lineup.
God damn.
And
Yep.
we heard in every listen, and he was the one directing the troops, as they say. He was the one talking, in-game leading in many ways. So his presence is needed. I just wish that they could have looked at other flexes or other support subs other than Bance that would have been, fit this team. I think there's guys like Scraps and Wuskin on London that they joked about picking up that they didn't. There's other players in the league that they could have, at least looked at or pursued. And I guess there's no way of knowing if they did. From Crone's intel, he didn't know what Toronto was doing, other than it sounds like they're going to keep the same roster, which I think was their plan all along. So, I mean, it is a little disappointing. Again, they're going to be sort of in the same position they were last year, where they're a team, borderline top 6, borderline playoff team that can, potentially upset teams. And again, it's going to come to the Cam and Kleenex, but that's just my Insight as a sub is an interesting pickup. Maybe he makes his way in, but I would hold my breath on that one.
Yeah, I agree. They're going the Empire route, which is just sticking with what works, not trying to change it up too much.
Mhm.
Um, for me, it was just a lock that Zinni had to stay on this team. I mean, regardless of performance, which by the way was great, that
Mhm.
Toronto home series against Empire was hard to watch for me as an Empire fan because they were just on it. They stopped Shotzi's rotation last second.
Mhm.
But Zinni is the face of this team now. I mean, you've seen it in all of the media or the social media work that they're doing right now in the off season and even the mid season. He had the whole like Chef Zinni bit
Yep.
during the postseason. So he's the face of this roster, and I mean he brings that personality, which is great to see. You've got a player like Kleenex who's proved himself, as you guys said. Cammy, who I think excels beyond them, and I agree when it comes to Bance. Bance is just that X factor. He's there because of connections, but also he's that leader on the team. Um, of course, this roster isn't really exciting considering who's in free agency, especially who you mentioned, Woskins. That's one of the best ARs last year. Uh,
Yep.
But I think a lot of it is just chemistry. Hopefully, that chemistry pays off in a 4v4 format, pushes them from top 6 to who knows, maybe top 4.
Hopefully.
Yeah, at some point throughout the year, if Afro, who played for Team War last year, if he continues to look good next year, halfway through the year, I think he'd be a really good fit if they want to replace Bance. Like if Bance had a really slow year for whatever reason and wasn't keeping up, Afro's a guy to look out for. I mentioned him before on previous podcasts. Very, very good flex player. Can basically run any role. He ran the AR for Team War alongside Dave when it was a 2 AR meta. Then he ran Route Man because Vortex didn't want to rotate anymore. Um, so he switched it up a lot, and he's a very good young prospect out of England. So I think I don't know if this four will stick throughout the whole year. I kind of doubt it. I don't know if Insight's the right guy to pick up and put into place. So I kind of expect them to go for a guy like Chain or Afro or some European player to sub in at some point if needed.
Yeah.
But definitely, yeah.
Sorry, just to cut you. I really hope they pick up Afro as a sub. Like,
Afro's so
get ahead
good.
of the game because we saw like guys like Mac and Awakening be such game changers, and teams missed out on them
Yep.
because they didn't pick them up as a sub. I hope Toronto does go that route, but we'll see.
Yeah. Next team we got is Seattle. I think. Yeah. So why don't you go right into Looney because I know you want to talk about that.
So Looney's when Crone or CDL Intel, for those of you that don't know, go check him out on Twitter. A lot of these rosters, the reason at least we have an idea of what they are is because of him. He tweeted out this roster, and this one is definitely one that caught my eye, especially for Looney, because Looney didn't play the entire year. He had, I think, 2 events, and that's it. And he was put on the bench, and we didn't see him again.
He dropped 0.8s.
Drop 0.8s, and he's
Yeah.
gone. And we see a guy like JCap announce his retirement, and then we see a guy like Looney who's on a roster with Octane. I mean, everyone's saying, get Octane help, get Octane help. This is the roster that presumably he was a part of constructing, and Looney's on it, a guy that didn't really play last year. He is a smart player. Last 4v4 title that he was in World War II, he was integral in their success. He was on Rise. That was the best team or second best team in the game. He's extremely smart. I think that's probably why Octane wanted him. Obviously, his sister with Gunless, who's also on this team. Another guy that didn't really play the entire year, or at least played half the year, and then was put on the bench. So they're back together. Obviously, they're both very smart at the game, and I think that's one thing that stands out compared to the old Seattle roster, and I think that'll help them. Obviously, if they start clashing heads like they did on Rise, that becomes a whole other issue. And then we got Pristini, the guy that was, continuously crapped on by the community for his shit stats, despite him playing a very tough role. And he's on this team, which he and Gunless are uniting since their old United team, which is another interesting point. So this team definitely was the one that stood out to me as like really what I didn't expect. I expected an Octane and Gunless. I mean, those two together looked nasty. But Looney, I didn't expect him to find himself on a team like this or a team at all, to be honest, considering who we're seeing on the outside of rosters. So I think this team has a lot of potential. What scares me is their SMG pressure. Pristini and Looney, can they, keep up in the slaying department with guys like Simp and Abizi, Scump and Envoy, Illy, Shotzi, and Hugh, like, et cetera, as you go down the list.
Exactly.
Can they? That's the question for me.
See, I'm really happy you mentioned that because that was the point I was going to lead into.
Yeah.
My personal hot take is that this roster is not going to do well. They're going to fall flat on their face because this is, I mean, okay, you look at this rumored roster, it's 1,000% better than what Surge had last year. That's given. But this isn't the right solution for Octane. If there's one thing we learned from last year, it's that you need that combination of vets, but then you also need the second half of the equation, which is all of those cracked out AMs, and it's just that balance. I mean, FaZe had too much of the sorry, not AMs, young players, which FaZe had too much of. And who came out on top? Empire, who had Clay and Krim leading XEO. So I think that's the role that Octane really needed to be in. Pristini was a good choice for this roster, but then you have guys like Looney and Gunless, they've been in the game for a while, but it worries me to think about whether or not they're bringing that same fire and intensity to this roster. I mean,
Hmm.
my take on this roster is that Illy and Hoog alone could take Gunless and Looney at this point.
Yep.
Yeah.
I wonder though. I wonder about a little John action because I don't know what his status is if he's still banned or if he's available to pick up. But if John is available, Obviously, he missed a whole year, so that's some rust to consider. But if he's available somewhere down the line, I could see this team picking up John. And we talked about John a bit before the podcast, and with Yasser, we talked about he's going to be rusty. He didn't have a great year before this year in Black Ops 4. It wasn't his best year,
Yeah.
but I think he's definitely proven he did great in World War II. I think he sees John, like he's gonna play great. So I think this team, if they are struggling, he has experience with all these guys. I wouldn't be super surprised if he's a sub or something for them. Again, if he's not banned, I don't know what the situation
I
is.
believe he has been
Um,
talking to teams. According to CDL, until
he
he's
has
been
okay.
like in talks. He didn't release what teams, but he has been talking.
He has to have been rumored. Like Seattle has to have been talking to him.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
It must have been. So I wonder if he gets picked up as a sub and they work him out and try to get him back into playing form. But I do agree. Maybe an AM player would be nice. It's hard to know in North America which AMs to go for. I feel like it's so much easier to tell in Europe and in Australia. But in the US, you have guys like Sib and Fire who have said it before. I'll say it again. They need to get their attitudes checked or they will not get picked up on teams. But with that, let's go on to New York. So right now we have Clay, Mac, and Zuma rumored. I know Clay shot the rumor down, but come on. He defended it to the point where it seems like it's true.
Yeah.
So I can't really blame himself for that. And then the little blacked out picture of Pharaoh there because he's rumored to be joining them if they can win the bidding war for Pharaoh.
I think for me, if they get Pharaoh, this roster is they're 100% elite. They got to be top 4. I think
Yep.
Pharaoh showed this year what he's capable of in that SMG role, which I think we missed since he only played part of Black Ops 4. Especially going back to 4v4, his impact on S&D, especially with a team like New York that struggled in that game mode, I think will be a massive difference. I mean, we got Clay again. He just won a championship, and he was dropped. Obviously, I think he's gonna have that motivation to want to win again. I will say it'll be interesting to see the roles breakdown. I'm assuming Pharaoh would play Fex. They'd have Mac and Zuma as their SMGs, which again Zuma, obviously the face of the organization, he can't drop. I think New York's made a smart decision here with picking up guys like Clay, and if they do get Pharaoh, which they seem to really want, and Pharaoh apparently really wants to be on New York, but obviously they're having a bit of trouble buying him off Florida. Assuming it is Pharaoh, I think they're a team that you got to look out for because with Clay they're going to play fundamentally correct. They got guys like Mac and Zuma that are very fast SMGs, and Mac's proven himself. In my opinion, they're going to be one of the most dangerous teams to look out for.
I agree with that. The Pharaoh rumor kind of confused me because going right into the postseason, we saw a lot of tweets between him and Awakening saying that they really enjoyed playing with each other, just a back and forth conversation about how they'd really be looking to play with each other. Of course, business comes in between that and opportunities. For me personally, as an Empire fan, a huge Clay fan, I'd really be happy to see him go to New York. And if Attach leaves, I think that might actually benefit this team because a huge reason why people were calling for Clay to come to New York was to reunite that trio of Clay, Attach, Zuma, the trio that got me into watching professional Call of Duty as well. But one really important thing to consider is that trio was never really cemented. No one ever really saw them as, okay, this trio is 100% consistent. They're dominant. I mean, they had great performances, but we don't look back on them as a Scump, Karma, Crim.
Yeah, no.
It's nowhere near that. So I think Attach could find himself in a almost like what Crim was on Empire, a support vet. Clay and Zuma could team up, help out Mac, and who knows, another promising young player who's absolutely cracked out. Maybe even Frosty, if not Pharaoh. I think Frosty has huge potential, and it's just that X factor, that 4th spot right there.
Oh, for sure. I think from my understanding, Crone or CDL until I'll just keep calling him CDL until from now on. He has said that supposedly if New York does not get Pharaoh, they will go after Hydra, who
boom graphics.
I know you're excited to talk about Seth. Seth, why don't you mention a little? Because I know Clay's even tweeted about Hydra, and I know not necessarily all the people that follow competitive Call of Duty know who this guy is. I mean, he's being talked a lot about. So Seth, why don't you talk to us about Hydra?
Okay, so I've heard about Hydra for actually quite a while. So, what was it, IW or Black Ops 4? Like way back then, he was playing in these. I don't even know how to watch them. I don't even know if they're on Twitch or not. But he was playing in these offline tournaments where all the French amps play, and they kind of make a name for themselves, and they kind of go through that route. I think it's French and Spanish amps play in those events, like the EEG tournaments and all those things. And I just saw like Hydra's placements slowly start to get better and better and better, and his name started getting talked about more and more. And then this year, when they finally started streaming the challengers events, oh my god, this guy is a freak. Like I watched against there's a specific map. It's on a previous podcast. I talked about it and highlighted it, where he takes on Timur by himself on Hackney Yard, breaks P4 hardpoint, rotates all the way and gets spawns for P5 all by himself.
No.
Gets like a 7 spree. It's one of the craziest things I've seen in the game from any player really, and he's doing it against the best team in his region. He's very, very skilled. I'm scared to talk about him up too much because we've seen so many crazy rookies come in and change the game, like Simp and Illy and Shotzi. So I don't think he's on that level. I expect it to more kind of be like the Awakening and Mac level, where they're just incredibly talented. And so my thing with this is, I think New York would be a perfect fit because you have a guy like Clay, right? And he can kind of direct this young guy and direct Mac and Hydra and playing better and playing well. My problem is if he goes to Paris, which that's probably the alternative, right? If he goes there, maybe they keep Dens, but if not Dens, I don't know who's going to be that like veteran leader to help Hydra out because Trainhard actually didn't have that many good placements. I mean, they were always kind of like third, fourth, and fifth, sixth in the EU, so it's not bad. But they never really won a lot, and I think it's because he didn't really have the leadership and the team around him. And so I think a guy like Clay would be perfect for Hydra. I really hope that happens, and Pharaoh can stay in Florida because he is going to be really, really, really talented. And I'm thinking about the fact like him and Mac, that would be a scary duo.
Oh yeah.
So I'm very excited to see if he plays on New York.
So didn't Paris actually drop Dens?
I don't think so.
So from my understanding, is they dropped the entire roster, but CDL himself
they?
has
Okay.
said that the two players that they've been open to re-signing would be Dens and Zed. Those are the only two. So the rumored roster, assuming Hydra doesn't go to New York, would be Hydra, Pred, who was an AM in the APAC scene,
He's
and then
disgusting.
Dens and Zed, which I mean any roster, to be quite honest, would have been an upgrade from their former roster. I mean, no offense to that team, but they were way too inconsistent, and they had like one or two good events. So it's nice to apparently the direction they're trying to take is to go after French players and build that identity, which I think is massive for them. I think they should have focused on that in the first year, and especially if they're finally doing that. So good improvement for them. It's again, I agree with you. The point that we've got this idea of rookies, and we've honestly had such insane talent of like rookie class or whatever the past couple of years from like Kenny, if you want to consider him, Pharaoh, Illy, Shotzi, Celium, Simp, Mac. Mac and Awakening, although they're not on that level, they're still
crazy.
Like we've been blessed with insane rookies that maybe we're hyping up people too much, but I mean,
this guy's a freak, dude. He's a freak. Yeah. And for Pred, it's hard to tell because obviously he was on the best APAC team and there wasn't any competition there. But Pred did look very good. I personally would want to see a 5-stack of all French players on Paris. You could four. You could easily do a great team like Whalers, Brezzy, Hydra, and I guess Zach. Like that would be actually really competitive. The problem is that like orgs are going to be so hesitant to go for that because they're not as proven. But if you guys remember that Denial team, Black Ops 4, that qualified for champs, they were one game 5 away against Splice from making it to upper bracket final.
Yeah.
They were so close before Denial dropped them. So
I mean, all I have to say about this is, if Paris actually gets some French players this season, it would be much better for their branding.
That's true.
You've got people out in France forced to support Australians, so try and fix your brand. But from what you're saying, it seems like he's really proven himself, and I mean, as we've said time and time again, young players, you can't really go wrong with them at this point. So
yeah, it seems like it.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna wrap up there with the rosters. There's like a long list of free agents to fill in still, and there's other rosters looking for pieces. But like I think we'll get a pretty good understanding in the next couple of days of who's going where and who's going left out. But obviously we had the big multiplayer reveal yesterday for Cold War, so why don't we get into that a little bit? Obviously I have slide cancel here. The devs said they were going to patch that and fix that, so hopefully that does get fixed.
Communication.
But how'd you guys like it? How'd you like the game?
For me, I mean, it looked great to me. I like the maps, especially Miami and Moscow. Those two look great. I was watching Scub's POV for most of it, and yeah, again, he's already saying it's his year like every other player, but he looked really good.
It's my
And
year.
it's genuinely nice to see guys like him and other players have fun, because it's, I think, something we completely missed on Modern Warfare. Score streaks, the only issue I had with it was the fact that it carries over. Although a way someone explained it, it doesn't sound as bad as we all thought. It sounds like essentially, like, let's say a kill streak was 15 kills in a row. There's two ways apparently to get it. It'd be either getting 15 kills in a row, or the fifth, whatever the score is, or getting 3 kills in a row 5 different times, or something like that.
Okay, that
So
makes
it
sense.
isn't as bad. Team control again. I'm happy. I don't want domination. I was thinking about
No, yeah,
CTF, but I guess maybe it'd be too slow. I mean, control we've seen play out very well, so excited for that. And I mean, I'm just excited for Cold War. Maybe I'm getting too hyped, but that's just how I am.
I mean, when I tuned in, as soon as I saw David Vonderhaar's face, I already knew we are set for another great year of Call of Duty.
I
I
hope
mean,
so.
you look back at the past decade of Call of Duty, and whether it's competitive, whether it's just gameplay, I mean, most memorable have to be the Black Ops games. I mean, yeah, you've got Advanced Warfare, which was great for competitive, but to me personally, it doesn't beat BO3. Just the way things were, and yeah, the main factor that I was worried about too is score streaks, but that brings me back to David Vonderhaar. I mean, to me, I can just trust him. Like that's the guy that invented raps in BO3, which was
Yeah.
one of the most dominant kill streaks I've ever faced. So I think we're in good hands going to this year. For the competitive side of things, um, to me, the main thing I'm worried about is the maps. We saw a lot of larger scale maps. I know a lot of the gameplay was Ground War or Treyarch's take on Ground War. But I hope we do still get some close quarters combat, which
Yeah.
I think Treyarch also excels in, whether it's like Combine from BO3 and maps like a Raid
Mm-hmm.
from back
Oh,
in the day.
Yeah, that was my fear with control coming back when I did see the larger maps. Is 4v4 control on a large map scares me a little bit. It seems very, very slow. So I don't know how that'll work out, but 4v4 control, if it's played the same way it was played in Black Ops 4 with like the two different sites, it's gonna be a little weird because I would assume the defense could have an easier chance to rotate between the two. Because then how do you hold? Do you like gamble stack and four hold something? Do you send 3 and 1? Do you do 2 and 2? Like that kind of figuring out that ratio is gonna be kind of tough for teams, but it should be interesting.
yeah, but I
Um,
think that wraps
okay.
up the podcast pretty well, though.
Yeah,
Awesome.
we talked about a lot, and so yeah, Gersh, what are your overall thoughts on Rostermania right now?
I think a lot of it is just having to go with the flow. I mean, it's all kind of blindsided everyone, whether you're a player, whether you're a fan of the community, and hardest part of it is you just never know. I mean, at this point, everyone's just looking at Crone, CDL Intel, or looking at
Yep.
official announcements. Of course, as we get closer and closer to that deadline, as of the day that we're recording this, it's 4 days away. We should have everything fall into place, and hopefully they're competitive rosters going into next year.
I mean,
Yeah.
the only thing, I mean, we're talking about how things have changed in terms of Rossmania. To give you an idea, I did, off the top of my head, I decided to make a list of players that currently either aren't linked to teams according to Crone, or are not going to be in the league. And we got guys like Jerd, who played for years, Chino's played for years, won chips, Metals, who was on the Ultra, one of the better players, not going to be probably played. Frosty, as good as he is, hasn't been linked to any team supposedly, which is upsetting. Havoc, who hasn't re-signed with Florida yet. So
That's
who knows?
ridiculous.
Kismet is gone. ASIB is supposedly gone. Garter X hasn't been linked to teams. Temp has received an offer, so where he goes will be interesting to see. Scraps, Winston, and Zero, assuming a couple of them go back to London, but Watkins has even talked about how he might not even get an offer at this rate, which is absurd. Jocks, Luca, Decimate, Saints, Aqua Classic, Slack enabled. Like that many players, there's not going to be in the league next year, and that is just
It's 12. Yeah, it's 12. It's 12 spots, right? It's 12 guys in the league last year who are not going to be in the league
more than
this
12
year,
because
plus any
all the
rookies. Yeah.
rookies we're getting in, the players on the bench like Looney and Gunless that are now starting again. So it's quite the purge.
The hardest part of it is all the AMs that played their heart out, hoping for a
Yeah, that's
pro
what I
spot
feel.
next year or the following year, and now they're just going to be back in the loop. If
Yep.
anything, they're getting harder competition with all the pros that are now
Yep.
dropped down. So it's rough.
Yeah. So if anybody from CDL is listening, challenger scene, man. If you have a good challenger scene this year, it's going to be very fun to watch because you got a lot of pros playing in it.
Make
So
sure it's streamed.
you know, yeah, please stream it. Stream every single solitary challenges event. Just it doesn't matter if like 1,000 people are watching it, if 100 people are watching it. Fucking stream it, please.
All right, so that
Um,
that should wrap
but
up
that'll wrap it up.
the 14th episode of Hipfire Podcast. Thank you, Gersh or Vonerhaar Elite.
Yeah, of course.
If you'd like now, you can plug your socials, please.
It's just VonderhaarElite Elite on Twitter. I actually did happen to start a YouTube channel, which I'm hoping to get some content on. At this point, though, I'm kind of waiting for RosterMania to cool down because I don't really have the stuff in place to keep up with the the daily craziness that we have at this point in time. But yeah, just head over to my Twitter, VonderhaarElite Elite, and I'll see you guys there.
Yeah, they'll be all in the description below. But with that, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.
Yeah, see you.